Hey, David.
Hey, brother, what's happening, man? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. What's going on? How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I am just chilling, man. I just got back from a long road trip over to Las Vegas and out to California and a bunch of stuff. So, yeah, just back home, settling in now.
You're a busy guy these days, man. I want to thank you very much for joining me on the IANO podcast, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome, man. No problem.
Yeah, well, top of the episode, I'd like to have a little cheers, a little Austrian mountain water. And cheers to you, man. Happy New Year to you and your family.
I'll meet you with some Ellefson coffee. I know that is actually a very popular brand now, so I know that one. I see it around at a lot of restaurants and things around town, even here in Scottsdale. So good choice.
Yeah, good. Well, hopefully a future sponsor of the podcast, we're working on that. So
nice.
You're in Scottsdale. I'm in Buffalo, New York. You got some memories of Buffalo that come right at you right now?
Well, certainly your team has been kicking ass in football, which is great. So I've been watching that. Yeah, watching that pretty regularly. Buffalo, it's funny. Our early lineup in Megadeth, Chris Poland and Gar Samuelson, they're from a little town called Dunkirk, which I think was right near there.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, there's that. Just touring and stuff over the years, always going through the area. So, that's funny. You've got the Anchor Bar there, right? That's where the Buffalo wings were created, right? The Buffalo hot wings. So I remember going there and eating there. And let me think, what else? Is Buffalo where the bass player in Stone Sour has his restaurant? Is that there?
Yes, that's right. Johnny Chow.
Yeah, Johnny Chow. Yep. Remember me and Bumblefoot did I was doing a bass story tour, and Bumble was on tour with me. So we stopped down to Johnny's restaurant and noshed out. So that was kind of cool. So that's probably my most recent memory being through Buffalo. I was doing that.
Well, I'm going to shoot him a text after we hang up here. Johnny and Bumblefoot, two previous guests on IANO, really fun guys to chat with. But
nice.
What can I say, man? It's an honor to me, and I'd like to start off with a little fact of the day. So today, January 21st, it was back in '72. Was that 50 years ago? It was 50 years ago that Pink Floyd debuted "The Dark Side of the Moon" live in '72. Are you a Floyd fan? Are you a fan of the record?
I am a little bit. It's funny. I actually just did a record with for Cleopatra Records. They did the Wish You Were Here album, and they asked me to play in a track. So I played in a track with Carmen Appice on drums, and Joe Satriani on guitar. The instrumental track. So that was actually pretty cool. That just came out. In fact, I have the vinyl in the other room here. So that's my most recent Pink Floyd experience. And I did see Roger Waters when he came through town a couple years ago. And it's funny, when I first moved here to the Phoenix area back in 1993, Pink Floyd, I think probably the first tour without Roger Waters. So Gilmour fronting it at that time. They played at the stadium here at Arizona State University, and what a great show. I'm not going to lie, Gilmour's kind of my favorite of the two. I know the two, they come as a package, that's Pink Floyd, but if you had to separate them out, I appreciate Roger because, all of his kind of lunacy and craziness is what sort of is the the insanity inside of Pink Floyd, but I love the smoothness of David Gilmour, and I'm a super fan of his guitar playing. So I feel privileged that I got to see both in my lifetime.
Very cool. Yeah, I think no one has better feel ever than David Gilmour really, in the guitar.
Yeah.
Roger Waters screaming in "Careful with that axe, Eugene." He's that crazy
yeah.
guy. I was honored to see Gilmour in 2016 at the Hollywood Bowl, so that was killer. But
by the way, little trivia on Pink Floyd, their original name was Megadeth. I don't know if you knew that. You look that up. That it's actually a fact.
Bullshit, really?
Yeah, and it's funny that the guy who gave us any problems over the name was the drummer of the Circle Jerks, because he had performed under the name Megadeth, DEATH, at a little club in Hollywood, maybe Club Lingerie or something like that. And, as these things go, they wait till you get signed to a major label, like when we signed to Capitol Records. And of course, he sends the letter over. Hey, by the way, first use, of the name. So we had to settle that little dispute early on. But, so yeah, but Pink Floyd didn't give us any problem over the name. So they were cool with it. So.
Well, wow, just learned something there. And this week we have two rock and rollers turning the age of 70. So Ian Hill of Judas Priest just had KK Downing on a few weeks ago. That was a fun chat. And then Paul Stanley just turned 70. So
no kidding. Three of probably my favorite icons ever. In fact, I'm looking at my Kiss Alive lunchbox up on the wall right here. And I love Paul. To me, Paul, I love all of Kiss, but Paul, I love his book. To me, he is a real artist and rock star and all the rest of that stuff, and that's kind of the beauty of Kiss, is each guy had their own place and their own charisma, which I thought that was very clever. Kind of taught my generation how rock bands should be, that every person kind of in the group has what they do. KK Downing and I, it's funny, KK and Ian, I didn't get to know Ian very much. When Megadeth, we did when Rust in Peace came out in 1990, we went out with Judas Priest on Painkiller. Dave and Rob were kind of tighter buddies. We shared a sober lifestyle at that time, which was kind of cool. He was, very cool about that. Excuse me. Yeah, it's dry here in the desert after coming home from California. But KK and I always got on well, and remained friends. And a mutual buddy of mine here in Scottsdale had actually connected the two of us a couple of years ago. And so I went over. In fact, we were actually trying to get Alex Skolnick was talking to him. We were trying to get Ken to play a solo on the last Metal Allegiance record, but he was busy with other stuff, so it didn't quite work out. But I got probably the better deal out of that one, as I went over and performed it at his KK Steel Mill in Wolverhampton. And then what started with, hey, do you want to do a book signing together? Hey, you want to jump up and jam a couple songs? Turned into the concert of the year with me and KK and Ripper and Les Spinks and his guitar player AJ, putting together what ultimately has now become KK's Priest, which is pretty cool. So I was glad to get Ken out of the house and get him rocking again. There's more great rock and roll inside of KK Downing, and I'm glad he's showing the world what he's got now, which is cool.
Yeah. All the best to KK Downing. And Sermons of the Sinners, the new record. He turned 70 in October. He's got long hair. Paul Stanley's got long hair. Ian Hill, and you, Dave. I mean, you're rocking the long hair too. Do you see yourself doing this into your 70s?
My generation, we grew up with this. And again, I grew up, starting to listen to music in about the mid 70s. So all my heroes, Kiss, Sweet, Styx, Ted Nugent, Aerosmith. Everybody had long hair. That was the deal. So that's what we grew up with. And I cut my hair. I had kind of high and tight like yours at one point back in the 90s. We were doing a video shoot for the song Trust off the Cryptic Writings album. And I'm standing there in my leather pants, sweating my ass off. And when I moved from California in 93, when I moved from there out here to Scottsdale, it damaged my hair because the water, the sun, the heat, it's just a whole different condition. My hair likes being by the beach. I'm not going to lie. So when I moved out here, it got kind of trashed and beat up. So during the euthanasia cycle. So when we got into, we were literally I shot the video of the long hair. I think literally like the next day or two, I buzzed it all off and we kicked off the Cryptic Writings tour, which had a little different look because I have no tattoos. At the time I had kind of pierced ears, I guess. But, I think in order to pull off the short hair as a rock star, you need to have, like Sully and Tommy Lee and these guys, they pull it off because they've got short hair, but they've also got, they're tatted up. They've got a pretty tough look, which I think you need. And that's not my look. I've got freckles. I got the tattoos that came from the factory when I was born. That's all I got. So I've never been a tattoo guy, for me personally. So, I don't know. The long hair is just, it's part of the uniform. I like it, and that's what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, damn right. Damn right. We got David Ellefson here of the Lucid, formerly of Megadeth. One of the biggest metal motherfuckers that has been on I Ask No One Yet. So I'd like to start with the quote of the day, and that's from Dale Carnegie. And discouragement and failure are two of the surest stepping stones to success. And I would absolutely agree with that. What you got going on with the Lucid and all these other things, you got the Ellefson coffee, and we'll get to some of these other projects that you're involved in these days. But how does it feel? What's exciting you the most about the Lucid? And you had that new record that came out on October the 15th last year.
I think that's always what it is. In fact, look, we'll use KK Downing and even Judas Priest, because Ian Hill, one of my favorite bass players. In fact, I heard some soloed tracks of his and some solo tracks of mine, and in a way, we could almost be the same player. The way that we create bass lines within the context of a dual guitar band, very heavy riffs. The bass sometimes creates this foundation. At other times, it jumps in and picks up certain notes and parts of the riff and stuff. I look at a lot of my heroes, and being in one band for all these decades, like I have been myself, with Megadeth and that, there is this, you come to this point where it's like, you started something when we were really young, because that was, the idea at the time. And then, as you get into your, dare I say, adult years, 30s, 40s, you kind of go, all right, this was a great idea as a teenager, but it's maybe not such a great idea now that I'm a middle-aged guy. And, like most of us, we start families, we buy houses, we do grown-up things, and I think that's the challenge. In fact, I remember when we first moved out here, me and Dave had moved here, Marty was moving here. A lot of our operation was pretty much transitioning from Los Angeles to Phoenix. And this was early 1994, writing and beginning to record the Euthanasia album. And I remember Dave, I was giving him a ride home in my car. And, we had nice cars, driving to our big houses out in the suburbs. And I was about 4 years sober at the time. And I remember saying to Dave, as I was driving up the 51 freeway here in town, and I'm coming around a corner to get off on Shea Boulevard, where both of us lived. And I said to him, does it ever bother you? I'm driving. I said, does it ever bother you or concern you that, we started this band and we made, we've made this living and this comforts that we have now from writing angry music. And now maybe we're not so angry anymore. And I remember he just he was distracted. I think he was writing a lyric or he was thinking about something. And he looks over at me and goes, huh? I said, never mind, it doesn't apply to you, and in some way, thank God, because, that was kind of the core of, I think, how we grew up is, I would drive, because when in LA, when I first moved there, I moved from Minnesota. I had a van. I was the only guy that had any wheels. So David ride shotgun. He'd be thinking about things, coming up with song ideas, lyrics in his head, going over riffs in his head, and we'd sort of talk about it in the car while I'm driving, right? And that was just kind of, so it was funny that there we were at this time, 10 years later, not broke, not living in Hollywood, not having to, find some, roommate to move in with, squat in their house or whatever. But now we're going, now we're comfortable, and we've, to a large degree kind of had arrived as double platinum, rock stars who had done the work and starting to get some of the rewards. And it concerned me because, during that was when I just got married, my kids were young, a different phase of life. And so I think, you think about these things and you go, God, how much longer can this continue? And a lot of our groups that we know, they break up, members leave. You know, I think Kiss tried to do it right rather than split up. They each did solo records at that time. They ended up splitting up anyway, essentially, you know, Gene and Paul carrying on, but, you know, it was kind of like me and Dave, carry on no matter what. And, but, you know, that's part of growing up, man, you know? So, you know, that's why even when Ken left Judas Priest, it was like, you know, it was like, hey, dude, you might be done with that band, but you're not done. You know what I mean? Like there's more in there. And that's hard because when you've grown up and you've spent so much time and you have such an identity with a certain group, it's, you know, it's like actors, you know, it was hard for, I'm sure, you know, Jennifer Aniston has done well, you know, going off, but, you know, most of them, like you're known as the cast of Friends or, you know, the cast of Gilligan's Island or, you know, Cheers or whatever, you know, you just become known. You know, James Bond, Sean Connery, Roger Moore, you know, it's like you've just become so identified with the franchise. It's hard to go off and do something else. You know, sometimes the audience doesn't want you and they won't let you in a lot of ways. And so I've been through a lot of that. You know, when Megadeth had disbanded in 2002, you know, I started off, I went out and did a group called F5 and I played with Max and Soulfly for a bit. And I think fans like that one. But, you know, it's hard because, especially for me, you know, being a founder and creator of the band with Dave, you know, we started that thing together, and that's who people know me as, you know, and always will forever, you know, and that's fine. I have nothing against that. But, you know, now as I'm not performing in that band, you know, my own desire is to go keep doing other things, you know, and I think one of the things that I'd like to think I've done it somewhat successfully is I've sort of trained the public to know, yeah, certainly you know, I've been the Megadeth guy for sure, but wait, there's more, you know, that there's other things. And I think the Lucid is just another example of that. As you know, I'm sure we'll continue to write and record other things moving forward now. People are somewhat open to accepting that, you know, it's not the what band is David in today syndrome. It's more, oh cool, he's creating with this person over here, oh he's cool at creating, you know, because I've done it so long in one group and people know me as that. I think to some degree there's a bit of license and allowance now for me to do things with other people, and it's seen as favorable, you know. I'd like to think I play nice with the friends in the neighborhood, you know. I get along well with people.
Yes you you do. And I could rattle off so many times I've seen you over the years in videos and Headbangers Ball and Big Four DVDs. I mean, your voice, just hearing you now, you've got a very clear, very well spoken, you know, you got a good voice. And you mentioned the word forever, and you damn right. I mean, Megadeth, that the shit lives forever. And so does what you're doing right now with the Lucid, which is featuring, which is funny enough, Vinny from Sponge.
Mm-hmm.
And the bands, I see you playing the bass, but the music I'm hearing is not matching that image of what you were just talking about. And I think that's one of the really cool things about this current project of yours and these other projects that I'm sure you'll be getting into. You're a great guy. A lot of people like and love you in the industry is what I could tell, and really excited for you, man. And, you know, you talk about, yeah. And you talk about like, you know, scrapping and in the early days of Megadeth. Dude, in July of 2021, you went into the studio and apparently you knocked out 10 songs in 2 days for this record.
Yes. Yeah.
It's pretty badass.
Yeah. It's, yeah, it was funny because Drew, who I had known for a couple of years, in fact, he even kind of did a little bit of intern work with my label. He kind of helped out a little bit with some stuff there a couple of years earlier. I knew he had played at Bang Tango. He played with Stephen Schroe from Kick Tracy, and was just kind of a guy in the neighborhood, just so to speak, you know. And he just hit me and he said, this was kind of summer of 2020. And of course, everyone's at home, pandemic's full blown, right? So everybody's just kind of scratching and itching to, you know, do something. Said, hey, you want to play on a track? I said, sure. So he sent over the song that became Hair. And I picked up my bass and I just plugged in, and I was like, that was really fun. Like, that was really simple, but really fun, you know, because obviously I'm pretty known for playing very complex, fast thrashy kind of music. So when I get to do anything other than that, it's I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of a treat. You know what I mean? Because it just takes me into a different headspace. So I played on it, I sent it back, and I didn't realize Mike Heller, the drummer in the Lucid, how involved he was with Drew on that. And I came to know him as a real kind of the engine. While Drew is largely the creator of the songs, you know, Mike worked well as a producer and someone to kind of counterpart with Drew. So then I joined in with this. Drew actually said, he goes, "Hey, well, I'm playing a couple more," and he sends me over like 13 tracks. And I was like, okay, that many more, right? But I got busy. I mean, I literally flipped this chair around and in a laptop with, you know, digital workstation, you know, that's how we make records. And well, at least we write a lot like that. You know, I just started writing charts and playing, and my chops were pretty good. I had been in Nashville recording a Megadeth record, and then I had worked on my ELLEFSON-SOTO cover record, so my studio ears were pretty sharp, you know, and so I was in that mode, and so it worked pretty quickly. And you know, it moved along so quickly that Mike just said, he goes, "Look, why don't we just all meet out here at my studio in LA, because then we can be here and record for real and really get great sounds and great tones." And so I went out. Drew drove out from Indianapolis where he was living. Vinny flew out from Detroit. And you know, there's a cool vibe when there's something brand new and everybody's there in the room. You know, Drew, it's funny, Vin shows up with sandwiches and drinks for everybody. You know, we'd never even met the guy, right? And I of course knew of him. We were sort of our, you know, Sponge and Megadeth were at times competitors on the active rock radio charts back in the 90s. You know, working our way up the charts, and everyone loves Sponge. I mean, they're just a cool band, you know, and Vin's one of the cool guys. And to meet him was just awesome. And he's sitting back there kind of being the cheerleader as I'm playing, and you know, Drew's there with guitar in hand. So, you know, it's nice to go. It's I could turn to him and say, "Hey, this riff right here, like, how do you play that? Is that a slide, or are you bending the note?" Like, you know, really getting into the psyche of how he created a riff or a part. And you know, those are the things that are so cool being in the room, is literally this musical conversation that happens between people. And Mike, fantastic producer, had great ideas. And I like being produced. You know, when I'm in the studio, I like to be kind of the moldable clay. You know, it's like, look, I show up obviously with years of experience, pretty good skill set, and a pretty versatile player. And then, you know, here's what I think it should be. Feel free to give me any feedback if you think it should go somewhere else, or you're hearing anything else, you know. Then that way you start to become you're co-creating together. And that to me is the joy of being in the studio making records.
Yeah. I mean, you're evolving your brand, and I couldn't not get this.
Nice.
Shirt. It's my new gym shirt, man.
I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. And I'll include a link below to our viewers where you can get this badass shirt and other shirts, and
yes,
you could see what Dave's up to these days in 2022. And just talking about 2021, though, there are so many bands that, you're right, they're coming out of COVID. They want to get the creative juices flowing. They want to get out there and give it to the fans. Bands like Iron Maiden with Senjutsu released a record in 21, just like the Lucid. Trivium's In the Court of Dragon. Rob Zombie, Chevelle, the Vibratus, love that record. I think KK's Priest. But before we go on, man, I just have to ask, Gojira and Mastodon, both of those bands signed this Chucky doll. They're
nice.
my buds.
Very metal.
Yeah, very metal.
Yeah.
Have you heard their new records, Hush and Grim and Fortitude, yet?
You know, I've seen them, and I have not gotten into them yet, and they're definitely on the to-do list. You know, it's funny, when Sean Drover was in Megadeth, man, he and Chris Brody, but especially Sean, he was really into Gojira and kind of got me paying more attention to them. Mastodon, of course, I've known of since in the, I don't know what, 2005 or 6, whenever they were, you know, kind of making their impact, and got to know them as friends. Troy Sanders and I have done a lot of stuff together with Metal Allegiance, so I've traveled with him and hung with him. You know, those are fun experiences when you get to work with somebody outside of their environment, because you get to know them individually and get to kind of know what makes them tick and what their influences are. So no, I will definitely check those out for sure. So thank you for the reminder. Thank you, Chucky, from behind your head there. He's looking in on the interview.
Yeah. But yeah, man, the bassist is Jean-Michel Labadier of Gojira. Gives it to the live, man. There's just, as a bassist, jumping around like a crazy man. And then Troy Sanders. Yeah, I mean, I was there at the Whisky, to celebrate Lemmy.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
The West Hollywood, there at the Whisky.
Well, what was interesting about that is, as you see there, we had these 4 shows put on sale, which, you like, don't ever put concerts on sale, 2 weeks after Christmas. And I had people going, dude, what are you guys doing? Why are you going out like in the new year? Everybody's broke. Their credit cards are maxed out. And it was like, I don't know, this just fell in our lap. So we took the offers and we did it. And then lo and behold, Lemmy passed, the week before, and didn't he pass like day after Christmas or something?
Yeah.
So it was interesting. We were playing the Whisky. What was that, like February 7th or 8th or something?
Yeah, this was January the 9th. January the 9th.
The 9th, yeah. So January the 9th. And so as it turned out, they had his funeral that day. I think over at Forest Lawn, Dave Grohl, everybody was there. Everybody was in town. And so they basically shut down that section of Sunset Strip from the Roxy down to the Rainbow. They just literally shut it down, and it just was like full on heavy metal pandemonium in Lemmy's honor. And we basically became the house band that night at the Whisky. And they asked us, said, hey, can you do a set of Motörhead to just sort of celebrate it? And we said, of course. So we had Mickey D come up and John Tempesta and, a bunch of different people. Corey Taylor came up. I mean, everybody was there. Nita Strauss, the whole who's who of heavy metal rockers in Hollywood and beyond were there. So, in an ironic twist of fate, we, sort of became the celebration of life band, and it was the events that night following the funeral. Obviously it was very sad. A lot of tears and hugs, and just knowing that was an era of heavy metal that was now done. And like you say, the music carries on forever, but to know that Lemmy was such a personality, especially right on that block, because he pretty much lived at the Rainbow. And I was just at the Rainbow last week. Me and Jeff Young actually were hanging at the Rainbow. It was so funny, Dust telling stories and getting caught up. He was humming me a riff. We're sitting in the booth, that back booth in the corner there, kind of the booth. And he says, dude, remember this riff that I had? Because we were talking, because Jeff and I would room together. And so far so good, so what? We would double up in sharing rooms, when we had hotel rooms. And I'd room with Dave a lot. Chuck and Jeff would room together. And Jeff was saying how he'd room up with Nick Menza a lot of times. Mostly because Jeff didn't smoke, right? So he didn't want to smoke around. But I like rooming with Jeff because we play guitar all the time. Like, I learned a lot about guitar playing from Jeff because I was into playing a lot. But he goes, dude, remember this riff I had? And he hummed it. And I go, man, I totally remember that. And it had 2 pieces to it. So we're actually working on it right now. We're taking this riff, like literally today, we're working on it. After I get up this interview, I'm actually going to plug in and work on developing this riff out a little bit. So, which is pretty cool. So I might even use some of Nick Menza's drum tracks. So
wow. I think
yeah, pretty cool.
So many things I could go off in every way, but I'll let you get to that the music making here soon. It's just, wow, it's so cool. I mean, dude, I was working at Hotel Bel Air, paycheck to paycheck, kind of, but yeah, it was just after Christmas, and I'm like, dude, I gotta go. So they had events, at the Roxy, at the Rainbow.
Yeah.
And I was right there front and center, man, all night. I was watching Asagita drink his Bombay Sapphire off the drum riser. I got my beer here, just like an awe. And you got you at stage right. And yeah, we were just talking about Troy Sanders. You guys covered, he went up there for Creeping Death and Running with the Devil by Van Halen. Just from a bass point of view, how does Troy hit you with his bass playing?
He's awesome, man. He's kind of like Glenn Hughes. I did a rock and roll fantasy camp tour with Glenn. And I'd known him a little bit before anyway, and then getting to share the stage together. And he's like a very violent bass player, right? In that he, when he plays, it's so freaking impactful. Like the stage rattles, and he'll hit one note. So funny that he's this great singer and he sings high, because he plays low notes, but he sings high, and he's just in your face. And he's just the sweetest, nicest guy. But man, when he gets on stage, man, he freaking means it. And that to me is kind of what reminds me of Troy. When Troy's a very nice, sweet, affable, kind of quiet guy off stage, smiles and just kind of grins and nods along. And then all of a sudden he gets on stage and puts that bass on, and he's like larger than life, And you'd think he'd have the Gene Simmons boots on when he walks around, because he's a presence. And when he plays, it's the same thing. He just digs and singing and everything. He's just like going for you. If it looks like he's gonna like pass out, he's just so but it's Troy is just great. Then after it's all done, he shakes it off and he goes back to being Clark Kent again. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the beauty of guys like that you can live with them off the stage, and then they just freaking rock the house when you're on stage.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen the guy all around the world, man, but he was walking down those steps and he had face paint on. I'm like, dude, why is he have face paint
Right.
on? I mean, he was really getting into that performance. I remember for Overkill, he put his hand in his pocket, pulled out the sheet, and he stomped it right on the front for those Overkill lyrics. And I forgot in the other room, but I got that lyric sheet. I just took it. And
nice. That's cool. One of my favorite songs to play was Road Crew. I remember playing, I think I used to play that in bands when I was growing up. I know for sure we played Love Me Like a Reptile. That was one of the songs my band back in Minnesota played. And that's why we put it on the Ellefson No Cover record and had Doro Pesch sing on it. Doro, she was pretty much Lemmy's sister in rock and roll, if you will. You know what I mean? Like they were just the cool, like kind of king and queen of heavy metal, and Doro's total cred, and the same thing off stage is super cool and great hang, but on stage just a freaking demon, and so it was fun going in back and learning a bunch of those tunes. And what hit me, learning Lemmy songs is that playing to the pick and the way he plays, and I think it's probably the way he would play so he could sing over top of it, sort of, because it's kind of this thing, where you're sort of like, it's that kind of, singing, playing. And it just hit me. He played the bass like it was like an acoustic guitar. I mean, you even think about like Ace of Spades, it's almost like a country jig or something, right? But because it was so loud and, this kind of straight ahead drum beat, it didn't sound like that. But just sitting down and kind of digging into more of his rhythmic style, because so much of how we play is really in our picking and plucking hand. That's really what drives it. It's not so much these notes over here. I mean, they're important obviously too, but this is where the swagger. And in fact, Fieldy had a great quote from KoYan. He said, "Our signature sound comes from the hand we sign our name with. The signature that we write is the signature we play." So I'm not right. So if you're a lefty, it's over here, right? Like Doug Pinnick or somebody, Paul McCartney. But when you're, righties like most of us are, it's this hand. So it's how we attack the instrument and how we, unleash our frickin' our psyche and our aura on that instrument. That is the sound of who we are.
Yeah, it is the signature sound. I really like that, how Fieldy said that. David Ellefson of the Lucid, you've got your signature sound, and Fieldy has his. And, you're talking about Lemmy, man. I mean, when he passed, it felt like it was like, this god. Hetfield's talking about him, like, in Halford and Ozzy. Any fun times with Lemmy over the years that stand out to you? I know you guys used to tour with each other.
Lemmy, it's funny. Again, he was just the guy, In fact, I remember when I met Dave and he was talking about, he just come out of Metallica and he was saying how Lars wanted Metallica to be the US Motörhead, and as I was listening to No Life to Leather, I said, I get it. I totally get that. And I know Lars became friends with him. And so that kind of translated over. And then, there was, you know what I think what it was about Lemmy, there was an authenticity. So I started to learn and started working with guys like Dave, and then as I worked with Kerry King, and then, you know, Pantera guys, and anybody who came up the ranks, you know, there's a lot of good bands, but the truly great ones, there's an authenticity there that really comes through and you really believe it, you know. And behind us, you know, we brought up Stone Temple Pilots and Alice in Chains and a lot of different, you know, Cold Chamber and, you know, these great artists, Static X and stuff. And so, you see these guys are the real deal, you know. And I think that's the thing that we all liked about Lemmy, that you can't quite put your finger on it because it's that sort of X factor. It's just, there was such authenticity to him, you know, that what you see is what you get. And, you know, Motörhead was like scary. They're like dangerous, you know. they're kind of like this biker club. And you know, the first show we did with them, I think, was Santa Monica Civic. Might have even been with Wendy O. Williams on the bill. And I think we played Santa Monica Civic and then down in San Diego. And then when the Peace Sells album came out in 1986, we were scheduled to do 5 shows with Motörhead, and we ended up only doing 3. And part of it was because their drummer at the time, Pete Gill, who had come over from Saxon, was the Orgasmatron tour. And he had these train tracks that went from the back of the stage, like kind of right up to like Lemmy's butt, right? Like and it was a one thing. It was like when he did his solo, he'd come up to the front of the stage, do the solo, then he'd come back. And, you know, Lemmy didn't care because he didn't really move around. So he just kind of stood at the mic. So he didn't care that there was train tracks behind him. But for us, we couldn't set our drums up, you know, sort of equal on the stage. We had to set them up on one side or the other, which was, you know, it's kind of an embarrassing look. It's not the right look for, you know, the band that we were, you know, coming out to be now, and a, you know, a big push from Capitol Records. So we did, I think, 2 of the shows, and then we pulled off 2 or 3, and then our managers got in a fight and we pulled off the tour. And that, quite honestly, that had some dissension between Megadeth and Motörhead for probably 20 years. And I got to know Phil Campbell over the years, probably more than anybody. And then, of course, Mickey D when he joined, because just prior to those Motörhead dates, we'd met Mickey because Mickey was playing in King Diamond. We had done a summer tour of King Diamond and Megadeth across the U.S. Yeah, exactly. Then when the King went solo after Merciful Fate, so Mickey was playing in the band, and then years later he got the gig in Motörhead, and then of course Scorpions after that. So, you know, Mickey's one of the good dudes of the neighborhood. But and again, like I said, I got to become friends with Phil Campbell. But I think what kind of reconciled that was in 2001 we were playing Grass Pop over in Belgium, and I forgot who the headliner was, but it was them, then Megadeth as direct support, and then Motörhead in front of us. And Motörhead's bus had broken down. Promoter came to us and said, "Ma'am, is there any way you could switch spots with Motörhead? Let them go on after you, because if they don't show up, I can't pay them, which would be really, you know, not good. And obviously the fans would love to see them." And it was kind of one of these moments where you just do the right thing, you know, and we did. We said, you know what, we'll do that. You know, we'll do that for Lemmy and the guys. And we certainly want them to get paid. You know, that would be shitty because tour budgets can be tight. And so we did. And I remember we played, and it was still light out. And then we came off stage and went back to the dressing room, and Lemmy and Mickey and Phil, they had just shown up. They were just coming in, and they're kind of beat up. I think their air conditioner quit working. It was a hot summer day and it was shitty, you know. It's just, you felt for them. You're like, yeah, it's shitty. And they were very thankful. They were very appreciative. And I think it was probably the first time we'd sort of talked as bands, you know, since 1986. And then it was sort of like the feud had melted away. It was gone, you know. So it felt good to kind of mend that fence with those guys. And then we had them out in 2013. We had them, or 12, I think it was. We had them out on a Gigant tour. They were direct support to Megadeth, and you know, so everything was fine after that.
Yeah, it's a really cool story that you shared, Dave. Wow. And Lemmy, what stood out to me about him was, the authenticity and the realness. Again, the word real gets so overused these days, but what Scott Ian said at the funeral procession and in his kind of testimonial, he said, you know, John Lennon taught us how to write songs, and Lemmy taught us how to be real. and he left the stage, and that's really awesome. And shout out to Killed by Death. You played that song. That was the first time I heard that song. Metal Legion played at the Whisky. My twin brother out in Athens, Greece, Ryan, that's one of our songs that we like to crank up whenever we're with each other. So, and with Metallica, you're talking about Metallica. It was the 40th anniversary last year. You guys have been in the same kind of circle with the Big Four, but with the Black Album, which is now in excess of 30 million records, did that help or hurt the metal community?
Oh, it freaking broke the doors down. Metallica were always the leader. They broke all the doors down to every obstacle in the way of heavy metal. To some degree, Iron Maiden before them had, superseded and become an arena act and done this stuff too. So it's certainly, you got to give credit to Maiden and even Def Leppard to some degree, because they started out as just, kind of a grungy little heavy metal band out of Sheffield, and then they became on to become, essentially almost like a pop act on some level. I mean, they became that big. So, those guys, certainly Def Leppard and Maiden, deserve credit for, sort of carving the initial path to sort of the big time mainstream, path for heavy metal, but then Metallica came in and they just fucking we're here, we're coming in, and they really broke through every obstacle of MTV, and just daytime rotation with their videos, and just became a household name. And it's cool because they have metal in their name, so it's it's not like there's any like, what is this? It's like, come on, it says metal right in it, what it is, and they didn't clean it up and pretty it up. They just kept it raw and freaking grungy and in your face, and it was, again, authentic, and so again, the likes of Lemmy, who influenced Lars, and down to the guys, I mean, that inspiration that stayed true, that we don't have to, I remember Metallica, that's always the thing, we do our own thing, we don't play by the rules. And to a large degree, they didn't, and that's, I think, what made it appealing to the fans, because let's face it, heavy metal's kind of working man's music, and that's why we look to our heroes, because they're like, God, I wish I could tell my boss to fuck off and just go do that, because these guys can do whatever they want, right? That's kind of that's the message, right? And so I think when we're, when it's our turn up to bat and we're the ones, it's important to stay true to that. It's like, yeah, don't forget, just because, again, now you got a nice car driving to your house in the suburbs, you know what I mean? Like those are some perks, but that's not the reason you did this, so don't get caught up in, don't suddenly, change gears, in who you are, and and all that stuff. And again, it's that thing of like, how do you stay true to yourself yet grow up? Because if you don't grow up, that's not good. So on some level, you got to grow up but stay true to yourself. And I think that's probably the hardest thing of kind of growing up in the public eye is, warts and all. You're going to make mistakes, you're going to fuck up once in a while, and some things are, but you learn, man. That's how it is. It's you're kind of back to your Dale Carnegie quote. Sometimes it's the mistakes we make that go, yep, when you fucking slam your own hand in the door, it fucking hurts a little more, and it's the old, the smart man learns from his own mistakes. The wise man learns from the mistakes of others. But when you're young, you don't have any wisdom. So you can't learn from the mistakes of others. You're like, I'll never do that. And then you do it, or something happens, and it's like, yep, now I know, now I've learned. And I think that always is, mistakes can become the best teachers we have.
Yeah, it's very true. I did something recently that was against my character, and owning up to it is the biggest thing. The most important thing is the hardest thing that you can do sometimes. But I just had that phone conversation with this lady 2 hours ago, and she was so caught off guard. She was in tears, and I'm not going to say exactly what, but everyone makes these mistakes, and it even separates you from so many others. It's just easy to kind of ignore it and put it in the past. But fuck yeah, man. And you talk about staying true to yourself and organic. I hear Lars talk organic. He always uses that word organic. I mean, dude,
you do that real well.
Thanks, man. My first time seeing you on stage, dude, was Big Four India. It was my first time to Southern California. And I was backstage with Metallica, and they signed this fucking poster, man. It was insane.
Nice.
I missed the Anthrax. I missed the Anthrax set at the beginning. I'm coming from 40-degree weather Buffalo. I'm in a desert just like you right now. And my skin doesn't even know how to react to my hair and everything. And I'm meeting my heroes. But then I got all my shit signed, and they're like, all right, see you later. So I go out to the pit, and you bring up a song called Trust. And your bass was just coming in with Trust. And I get the chills because ever since then, even before then, it's my favorite Megadeth song, man. And that is my, Dave Ellefson story, seeing you for the first time in that pit like that. And in Yankee Stadium later that year with the Big Four, that must have been pretty fun to have that battle of the bands with your friends, huh?
Yeah, it really was, because that was such a big statement, especially all these years later. They called us the Big Four because we were the four little independent, scrungy little thrashers that got signed to indie deals, and then we got signed to the major labels, and we got out on tour with the big guys, and that's why they called us that, because we were kind of the first four bands to to accomplish that out of our genre. And it was very gracious of Metallica to do that, because obviously they had superseded beyond, into the stratosphere of not just heavy metal success, but into mainstream, and going toe to toe with the big, still are to this day, with Taylor Swift. I mean, the biggest pop artist out there. They hold their own against everybody. U2, Taylor Swift, the Stones, and we love them for that, because they're our metal brothers, and because they carved this path and made a way for us when there was no other way. I mean, for that alone, they're forever hailed. And so for them to come back full circle and say, hey, let's take it back to the beginning and let's call these guys up and let's go do this on such a big level was really incredible, and, look, in some degree, we're all just a branch off the Metallica family tree, and it's a tree we're proud of, and nurture it, tend to it, grow it, keep it going, because it's what carves the way for Gojira and Mastodon and Slipknot and everyone that comes behind us.
Yes, it's so true. And you're part of that branch. You're with the Lucid. You're doing all these other projects here with Combat Records. ELLEFSON-SOTO maybe coming up here soon. And but dude, I gotta ask you, New Year's Eve '85. I think it was '85 with Metallica. You played with them in '93, and you played with them in that once in '85. Do you remember that?
I do. Yeah, no, I remember. So apparently, seeing the posters, Anthrax was originally scheduled to be on that show, and then they pulled off or came off of it somehow. So they added us. So it was Metallica, Exodus, Metal Church, and then Megadeth opening. And San Francisco Civic Center. It was, New Year's of '85 going into '86. And I remember Metallica still had their Ride the Lightning backdrop. And I remember talking to Lars when I got there, and they were talking about how they had just finished their new album and they were really excited about it, and which of course would become Master of Puppets. And this was kind of their homecoming, do a hometown show New Year's Eve, and of course they were just huge and great. But what I really remember about that show was how amazing Exodus was. That was the best Exodus show I've ever seen, and we'd done shows with them before at the Kabuki Theater and other things around town, and they were always great, super high energy. But man, that night, in my opinion, that night they were the heroes. I mean, they were incredible. And we had played with Metal Church, I think right before that. So that's '85. So we'd done the Killing Is My Business tour with Exciter around the country, and the last couple shows were up in Portland and Seattle. Best I recall with Metal Church on the bill, and so meeting those guys up there, and of course that first Metal Church record, man, it's flawless. I mean, there's just like all killer, no filler, man. I mean, it's just incredible, you know. And so that was a great night, to go up there and do that show. And again, I feel Metallica have been very gracious, they see obviously the significance of Megadeth and the family tree. I know Lars has remained, a good. He's been a fan of Megadeth. He'd come to our shows. I remember he and Stefan Shirasi, who wrote for Krang for a while, and then I think worked for Metallica maybe, doing fan club stuff. Like they'd come out to shows and we'd go up there. I remember it's like, so far so good, so what? They'd come out to shows, and Lars was always, he always wanted to see what we're doing. I think he kind of missed Dave, is my impression. I think he liked him as a friend, and it was probably a sad day that they had to make that decision to part ways. So we remained friends with him. We remained, is truly a fan. I mean, even when we did the Big Four shows, I remember James Lars came down to the Cow Palace after the first couple of Big Four shows. Slayer, Megadeth then went out, and we were playing the Cow Palace. So James Lars came down, hung out, and walking to the stage, because we all walked out together, and James Lars stood on stage right over by me. And walking to the stage, I think Lars was asking if we were going to play anything off of Peace Sells, because that's like they think his favorite album. So on the way to the stage, I think we agreed we would play My Last Words. We hadn't practiced it in a long time, but it's like, fuck it, we're going to throw it in the set, Fortunately, fortunately, we knew it because we'd played it recently and stuff. So because it's not like us to just kind of randomly grab songs out of the set, but it was kind of one of those, I think that shows Dave and Lars's friendship. They still, they're like the brothers who they get along. They have to rib each other once in a while, but they still get along. They're still brothers,
Yeah, and it really was an outstanding time at the 30th anniversary at the Fillmore when Dave came back out and he's doing Jump in the Fire and Phantom Lord and Metal Militia, playing those leads right in front of Ryan and I. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
man.
Well, Metallica, they don't forget where they've come from. They realize there's a lot of people who have built, this family tree, and they're gracious about that. And it's cool that they invite people back out. King, the King, whoever, Jason Newsted, they invite people to come back to the family reunion, and that's a beautiful thing,
Yeah. And just a few more questions here for you, David, but I got to ask you about Cliff. What was your relationship like with Cliff Burton, bassist of Metallica, the late great? And do you have any memories with him over the years?
I didn't know him that well. Again, when we would go up and play in San Francisco in the early days, so like 84, 85, 86, 87, these kind of early days of Megadeth, we play the Stone, we play these various places up there, and the Metallica guys would come out. And I remember Cliff coming out a couple times, just talking with him a little bit. Obviously, he was, the fan favorite bass player, for his impact with what he was doing with Metallica for sure. And then, after we had recorded the Peace Sells album, Dave and I went from LA. We stopped at my farm in Minnesota where I grew up for like a week. And then we carried on to New York, where we met our then to become a new manager. And Michael Alago, who had signed Metallica to Elektra, was really hot on trying to sign Megadeth to Elektra. And so he took us around town and, hobnobbing and, kind of, showing us the way of the major label rock star, with the awesome full expenses paid, you know what I mean? Because me and Dave were just broke as broke, and Michael took us over to New Jersey, where in Rutherford there, where Metallica were playing that night with Ozzy. So we went over to see the show, and was just was so freaking big, man. It was just amazing to watch how that band was just taking off and could really do no wrong, and then we went backstage and chatted with them, got caught up. And I remember my conversation, it was the last time I saw Cliff, because it was not long after that he had, the bus crash happened. And, but I remember talking to him about songwriting and his contributions on the new record, like Orion and things like that. And he goes, I didn't write as much on this album as I did on the last album. I remember that was kind of his comment. And and you know, he was always an easy to talk to guy. You know, it was just really, just what you see is what you get. You know, it's just, again, a beast on the stage, but off stage, just very chill and calm and very approachable. And, you know, so that was my only, you know, kind of interactions with him, or just, you know, kind of just trying to talk music, talk shop a little bit with him, you know. So that was my last interaction with him before he passed.
Sure. And R.I.P. the major rager on the 4-string motherfucker.
Yeah.
Burton, man.
That's him.
Dude, I think about the big four with you, but I also think about the Clash of Titans. So it was Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax. I think it was 1990, right? It was 1991.
91. Yeah, the Clash started in Europe when we kicked off the Rust in Peace campaign. Slayer had Seasons in the Abyss, I think it was. We had both, our managers were talking, Ron Lafitte for us, Rick Sales for Slayer there, and we talked about how to kick this off. And I remember Ron coming down to the power plant in LA where we were rehearsing at the time, and he said, yeah, so here's the plan, talking to Slayer, we're going to kick off this thing. I think maybe Dave came up with the name Clash of the Titans. I forgot who came up with it. And it wasn't a problem. For some reason, there was no trademark issue with the studio at that time, you know, with the film. So we were able to use it. And so we kicked it off with, you know, Slayer. And the idea was it was going to be Slayer, Megadeth, Testament, Suicidal Tendencies. And Testament had, I think, Souls of Black was their new record. And Suicidal, I think, had a new record out. And it's funny because Suicidal was becoming more of kind of a metal band at that time, right? They were a little less kind of Venice Beach punk, kind of more metal, so they fit in good with the sound. And the lineup was going to stay the same every night, which I actually liked. You know, when you're on a 4-band bill, playing 3 of 4 it's the sweet spot, man. It's the perfect spot because everybody's kind of getting lubed up. They're having a few beers, they're having fun, they're getting rowdy, they're getting sweaty. And so band 3 is when everybody still has their energy. By band 4, you know, if you're band 4, not everybody's there to see you. So some of the people will leave, right? So, you know, by the end of the night, not that people left for Slayer, but I'm just saying, you know, if the crowd's going to thin out, it's going to be on band 4. And plus by band 4, fucking headbangers are tired, man. They've got their ass kicked all night in the pit. They've got, you know, they're a little drunk. So, you know, really band 3 was always the best spot, you know, and so that was how we rolled with that. Then we came home off that and went out, us and Testament continued on with Judas Priest. But then, yeah, we would meet again summer of 91 with Slayer, Megadeth, Anthrax, and then with Alice in Chains opening. And Alice in Chains got on the bill because they were doing some dates with us in Europe in March of 91. And I remember Marty and I walked into the venue. It was the Volkshaus in Zurich, Switzerland, I think. And the dressing rooms are kind of go downstairs. And I saw the day sheet, kind of the running order of the show that night. And Alice in Chains was on the bill. And I remember Marty and I kind of laughed, go, what the fuck kind of name is Alice in Chains? Like, what is this, you know? And then they started playing. I remember they started, and we're all in the dressing room going, sounds pretty freaking good, man. Let's go up and check it out. So all 4 of us went out, me, Dave, Nick, and Marty, and kind of sat out sort of on the side front of the house. We're like, holy shit, these guys are great. Like, and we called home to Ron, our manager, and said, this is the opening band for Clash of the Titans, you know, because we didn't have one yet. And I remember Scott Ian, you know, he's always got his ear to the ground. He was signed off on it right away. He loved them. Slayer guys were cool with it, and that's how the Alice in Chains got on that. They did Clash. And they took their beating, man, because, you know, thrash fans like thrash, and of course Alice in Chains weren't thrash, so they got out there and they took their lumps, man. And then they left, then they finished that and went out with Van Halen, and fuck, the rest is history. Changed the world, you know.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm sure their faces were dented in when it came time for Van Halen. They have really good memories from that tour. Alice in Chains, man. It's the 30th anniversary this year of the Dirt record, and you know, R.I.P. Layne Staley. And one of the cool things I get to do on this podcast, David, is I get to talk to people that had interactions with some of my heroes that I'll never be able to meet. So I got to ask, man, what was Layne like? And did you have any conversations with him? Or
Yeah, you know, here again, probably the guy I knew the most in Europe as that tour carried on with them. I got to know Mike Starr, the bass player. He was fucking funny, man. Total rock and roll. He was just like, And those guys, I mean, they literally look like lumberjacks. You know, they had the whole, they looked like they were characters out of the Narnia movie or something, you know, I mean, really like woodsy and yet, you know, just, you know, at Jerry doing the drop tuning thing, it was like, I remember coming home and drop tuning my guitar and going, that's how they did that, you know, because we'd never drop tune in Megadeth. I mean, thrash metal, you don't drop tune, you know, and this was Jerry, you know, I mean, really started a path of a whole new type of guitar playing and tuning guitars and weird tunings that sort of half step down, drop tuning, that sort of C sharp, you know, tuning. And so, I mean, those guys were way ahead. I mean, they really changed how a lot of stuff was done after that, you know, but yeah, I got to know Mike the most, Jerry a little bit. Sean, I didn't really get to know until the summer tour, you know, a year later in 91. But I do remember this. I do remember in, so just seeing him, and Layne had long hair, and, you know, obviously what he sang was just like, you know, like Ronnie James Dio level impact, you know, like different sound, of course, but like, holy shit, like this guy's a rock star, man. And then seeing him, you know, like 2 months later, at the start of the tour, I think it was end of May, we started in at the amphitheater in Dallas, Texas. It was called the Starplex at the time. And Layne shows up to, I guess, kind of maybe the press conference or something we were doing. And his hair was dyed blonde, high and tight, looking good, like cleaned up, like clear as a bell. I was like, man, you look freaking awesome, man. And he goes, yeah, I just got out of rehab. I'm like, rehab for what? He goes, heroin. I was like, you were on heroin? And, you know, me and, you know, our band had fallen into that, you know, through the P-cells and that stuff and so forth. So we had fallen into it. And now, you know, we were a sober band. And so I was very keenly aware of what that dynamic is. And so, you know, both Dave and I, we went to him and we said, hey, listen, you know, we're, you know, on the wagon here, like we're the clean crew out here. So if you need a place to hang, please come to our dressing room, come to our bus. We're a safe haven for you, you know, because, you know, those guys were young, they're partying like every band does. You know, you're young rock and roll band out on a big tour. Of course you're going to be fucking partying, you know? And so we, you know, that was kind of my interaction with him. And he was very calm, very quiet, just kind of kept to himself. But again, on stage, when he opened that mouth of his, man, and he sang, changed the world, man, you know, and it was just, he was that guy. So, you know, that alone was just a good interaction. And I feel like, at least in my little corner of the world, I certainly extended any kind of an olive branch to be of help to him, you know, knowing how hard that is, you know, going out on the road, newly sober, trying to stay clean, man. It's not for everybody, and it doesn't work for most, you know, and I've been able to make it work. And so I'm very thankful for that, you know?
Yes. Yeah. God bless you, man. And just stopping drugs. It was rehab. You had the support of your friends. Was that, I take it was like that?
Yeah. I mean, you know, people reference, you know, some kind of monster. And when I saw it, I'm like, we did that 20 years ago. You know what I mean? For me, it was kind of like, that's old hat. We already went through that, you know, because coming, you know, 1989 was the transitional year. Nick Menza joins the band. You know, our manager, Ron, came in and he was kind of mentoring under Tim Collins, who managed Aerosmith and had gotten Aerosmith sober. You know, Aerosmith and Motley and David Crosby and a lot of these guys, they were the notorious ones who were all getting sober, you know, getting clean, because look, band members were dying and overdosing and not good, right? So it's sort of like, it was like, okay, new day, everybody's getting clean, and we're going to make this work because there's a lot of money to be made. There's still careers to be had, but everybody's got to get clean. It doesn't work for just him to get clean. Everybody's got to get clean, you know? And I remember there was a time I was literally in my apartment, and I'd been to rehab now, like I think 3 times. And, you know, it's just, I wasn't getting it, you know, I just still wasn't letting go of my old life yet. And I remember Steven Tyler called to do you know, essentially to kind of do a 12-step call with me, you know, kind of a sober brother to call me up. And I'm on the phone, I'm waiting for my drug dealer to call. And it's that moment going, shit, I'm waiting for my drug dealer, but my hero's on the phone, and we're going to, you know, and it was just that moment going, what do I do? Do I rush him off the phone? And because back in those days, it was like, I don't even think there was call waiting yet. So you couldn't even, yeah. So, but I remember having this talk, and it was very kind of him to do it, because, we had the chat, and that's kind of what it was, Nikki Sixx had done the same for me. A lot of people were there, to help us because they wanted to see us do well. They wanted to see us, survive and thrive. And it took a year or, took a couple years to make that turn, So in 1989 was that year. And it was interesting then when we ended up doing some shows with Aerosmith. I remember seeing Steven and telling him, said, hey, man, you may not remember this call, but you made a call to me. And I just want to thank you for doing it because it made a huge impact on me. And now I get to stand on your stage, a sober man, proudly, humbly, I should say, being, on the right side of the deal here, So, it's cool to, when you make the turn, that suddenly becomes, that is the most important thing, because the rock and roll dies if you die, so getting clean is the path forward to, to having, to be able to keep making great rock and roll.
It's a great sentiment. And that was a question from my good buddy, Mike Layne of Death Metal Pioneers out of San Pedro, California, Detriment. And, I just have to ask you just to switch gears here, man. And to our viewers, if you like what you've seen so far, subscribe, like is really appreciated. I'm on the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. For every new subscriber, I make a $10 donation to my fund in the link below. And, this is something, there's no stigma here on this podcast. So I got to ask you, David, have you been affected by suicide? Have you lost someone? And how maybe has it impacted you?
Yeah, there's, again, I kind of just shared, the era that I came out of, my heroes of the 70s all getting sober and carrying that message to guys like me who I got my start in the 80s and passing the torch over saying, hey, guy, there's a better way forward. Follow us, and we found a better way, through cleaning up off the dope and booze and stuff. So I've certainly been through that. Not all of our friends made it. We were just talking about our fallen friend Layne, and people that not everybody makes it out. And certainly it's not in any way to impugn their character or anything about that, because it's an addiction and it's an illness. Some people just a little too much, they overdose, they're out. Other people, it's whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. It's a lifestyle, and it is an illness, and I've come to know it now as an illness. And with it is a mental component. There's this physical craving, this addiction to the actual physical substance, and then when you take that away, it's those times when I didn't stay sober out of rehab is because I still had the mindset of an addict. I still had the mental, and it's a mental illness in that moment. It's this mental twist that always precedes, the next drink, shot, smoke, snort, whatever it is we do, and that has to be taken away. And I think, through recovery programs, there's a path of, kind of a spiritual antidote that has certainly been successful. And I think it's always about finding something greater to live for, and, our craft and our art and our talent is certainly given to us by the creator with the big C, who creates through us. And, that's how we know, that the music is divine, because there's only one who creates, and it's created. He made us to create and procreate. And this is what we do. We live in a creative, the thing was creative since the beginning of time. That's really what this is. And so the things that come in and stop or impede the creation are not from the good. They're from, the bad, if you will, not to use a heaven and hell antidote, but that kind of thing, right? That one is meant to perpetuate the good and keep the creation, the creativity and the joy going. The other is meant to destroy and kill and rob us of our passions and our talents. And unfortunately, what I found is drugs and booze answer to that lower authority, and some people can have a burger and a beer and it's no big deal, most people, but there are some of us that can't. And sometimes I've met certainly people who have had this sort of feeling of not having anything to live for, feeling like there's no use. There's only one way out, and that's for me to take myself out. And let's face it, we've all had that feeling of like, oh my God, we feel like the world's closing in. There's no way out. What am I going to do? I think a couple things. One, we're always meant to be in consultation with other people, so it's always good to have mentors and have sort of accountability partners that we could be transparent and fully truthful to. In some programs they're called sponsors, other times they're just spiritual advisors or mentors, whatever. So that I think is key. And because the secrets keep us sick, and the secrets live in darkness. And once the light is turned on and the secret is exposed, it dies. It can't live anymore because the light is on it, and, good things grow in the light, that's where things are nourished and that happens. So I think a lot of this is about getting out into the light, if you will. And living in partnership with other people, forming partnerships with other people. Because when we're alone, man, it's as old as the biblical stories itself. It's like, man, the devil wants to get us alone because that's when he can take us out. But when we're walking side by side with our brothers and sisters, we're in fellowship and we're in community, and he doesn't stand a chance. He doesn't have a chance when that's happening. So that's been my experience with it, and it's a way of life that I live daily, one day at a time. And it's easier to break things down into 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 5 minutes at a time, because sometimes even stopping drinking, what do you mean forever, like never again? It's just too daunting of a task. It's like, tell you what, just try it for today. Just get from sunrise to sundown. Try to put any mind-altering chemicals in your body, day one and day two, and then I had a week, and then I had a month, and then I was in recording Rust in Peace, and now I was focused, and I was in there with Mike Klink and Nick Menza, and we're cutting tracks, and now I'm in fellowship and brotherhood, and we're making music, and we're creating, and suddenly what we were creating for our future became much more important than this little dwindling, smoldering dust of my addiction that was in my past, So I guess that's kind of my bit of my testimony on that.
Well, it's a beautiful testimony, David, and thank you. It's okay not to feel okay. It's normal. And if you talk about when people get alone, Chester Bennington, Chris Cornell, depression has no face, and it's fine just to get it out there. Really, there's no shame in doing that. You're not.
And sometimes depression, and not always, but sometimes this depression is and this mental illness, there is a component that leads to addiction, or is maybe an offshoot of addiction and stuff. So again, it's all kind of part of a community. And I think, again, exposing it, talking about it, getting help for it. I remember there's a guitar tech. In fact, I just met with him last week in LA doing the Nick Menza documentary. John Gumby Goodwin, he was our guitar tech. Played in bands with Nick. And I remember I left rehab in February of 1989, and he came right over to my apartment the next day, and he was pissed. He goes, dude, you've got the dream that millions of us want, and you're just pissing it away. He goes, getting help is a sign of strength, not weakness. Now get in my car, we're going back to rehab. And he drove me back to rehab. And of course, in my mind, it was, yeah, but you don't understand. And, I'm different. My circumstance is unique, because that's the thing. That's what addiction and mental illness type stuff wants us to believe, is we're unique. You don't understand. If you were me and you had my problems, you'd do this too. That's all just the, sort of the justifications of it really, kind of hitting and impacting it. It's basically the addiction defending itself, because it doesn't want to say goodbye. I was just with a friend a few weeks ago, and he was talking about his first month sober. He said, man, I was just shell shocked. I didn't even know what to do. I didn't know how to think or behave because I was mourning the loss of my best friend, alcohol. New view.
Yeah, here we go.
There you go. There you go. It's like a new podcast now.
Yes, it is. Welcome back, everyone. David Ellefson, the Lucid. This is something that has not happened before. Actually, Richard Fortus had something similar a few weeks ago. But dude, thank you. You know, this is really powerful stuff, and coming from you, if we could help one person talk about it, it's important. So far, so good. So what? Came out 88 this week. You know, you brought up that record a few times. Man, In My Darkest Hour, that's one of my favorites. What are some of your proudest musical contributions over the years with Megadeth that you could really hang your hat on?
You know, I think one of the things in that record is when I really picked up the guitar and started writing. You know, I contributed some lyrics on In My Darkest Hour, some lyrics on Mary Jane, because that was a story of where I grew up back in Minnesota. It was a woman that was purported to be a witch who was buried alive in the Loon Lake Cemetery. But then writing riffs for Liar and Hook and Mouth, you know, so that was the first record that I really kind of got my teeth into the composing process rather than just being the bass player. Okay, nice.
Dude, so that's I'm going to take a listen to that song. And are there 3 songs that give you the most goosebumps that you just can't stop listening to these days or over the years?
Just of that I participated in, or just of any song?
Say that, you know, if we were to hang up right now, you know, you want to get in your writing mood, like what's going to get you excited? What gets you pumped? Kiss.
Well, God, that could be anything. Yeah, I mean, like Kiss Shout It Out Loud. That's kind of the song that got me into this whole thing. You know what I mean? So that one for sure. That Detroit Rock City probably. But you know, sometimes it doesn't even have to be a metal track. You know what I mean? It can just be, you know, the bass lines in The Cure are awesome. You know, Frank Bello and I did a record, Altitudes and Attitude, and we were always referencing a lot of the bass player Graham Mabey, who played for Joe Jackson. You know, so sometimes it doesn't have to just always be mean thrashing metal stuff. It could be, you know, the influence from, it could be Don't Break the Oath from Merciful Fate, as I look at your King Diamond, you know, graphic there. So Judas Priest, I mean, it could be any of this stuff. It depends on what I want to write. You know what I mean? It's like if I pick up a guitar and I plug it into a Marshall, I'm probably thinking, you know, Hellbent for Leather and British Steel. You know, I'm going there, you know. So it just depends on what mood I'm in and what it is that I'm looking at. If I'm sitting at the piano, I'm thinking Billy Joel, you know. So they all have their place.
All right. Yeah. Well, it's really obvious you love metal, and I've really enjoyed talking metal with you. And you're the producer with Nick Menza, this documentary finally. This Was My Life, you know, and what happened in Studio City in California in 2016, passing away on stage like that. What's the goal there with the documentary, really, to get his art out to others, or what's the focus?
You know, it's twofold. One is to really just kind of congruently tell the story from beginning to end, because there's a lot of kind of, you know, when Nick had these big 10 years in Megadeth, nine years, almost 10 years, and then that was over. And then after that, there was kind of a lot of sort of disjointed narrative of Nick's life. You know, he kind of disappeared there for a few years. He went dark, then he came back out. He was playing. You know, of course, everybody's like, dude, get Nick Menza back in the band. And we tried that, and it just really wasn't meant to be. But Nick was on to other creative things. So this is to kind of straighten that whole story out and get it just marching in one direction, and get everybody there for that. And the proceeds from the movie are going to be given to Nick's family, you know, to his boys. So it's, you know, for the most part, it's kind of a pro bono thing that everybody's pitching in and being a part of. So that, you know, so that his family is taken care of now that Nick's gone.
It's a really amazing gesture. And just finally, man, I want to say thank you again for joining me on I Ask No One, dude. It's been a pleasure chatting.
You are welcome, man. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Go Bills.
Go Bills, man. The Chiefs, Bills Kingdom, all that kind of good stuff. Next week, actually, we have your former bandmate joining me, Dirk Verbuen, and we're going to chat a little bit about what they got going on. But, you know, again, to our viewers, you liked what you saw, found any value, subscribe, like, always appreciate it. Like Lars said, we're just getting fucking started, you know, and stay happy, stay healthy, stay hungry, and stay happy. See you, David.
See you, buddy. Awesome.
Bye.
Bye.